There is a right way to learn to paint with watercolors that no one is teaching to beginners. I have been painting with watercolors for 3 years and have watched a lot of courses and tutorials, but no one has taught me the right order to learn each watercolor technique. So in this video I will share with you which watercolor techniques to learn first, which ones to learn last, and which are the most important ones, all while practicing my daily painting. When we first start to learn watercolors, we're bombarded by all the different skills we need to know. Wet on dry, wet on wet, lifting, charging, negative painting, dry brushing, pulling, timing. Ugh, it's just so overwhelming. But in the beginning, we only need to know a very few of these, at least the ones that we should begin with, and then gradually learn new ones. In fact, some of these techniques are kind of the stepping stones to one another. One of the hardest things about watercolor is to learn to control the water in our brushes. Learning to control the water on our paper comes with time and practice, but the first technique that gives us most control over this is painting wet on dry. This is because when the surface of the paper is dry, it makes it less likely to run and create the dreaded blooms, no matter how much water we use. However, to obtain full control of the wash we just put down, we are gonna let it dry, which is the second technique and one of the most important concepts about watercolor, which is layering. Working in layers gives us full control over the washes we put down, as well as it helps us get familiar with another two things that are hard to grasp when first getting into watercolor, which is timing and the final color. Washes tend to look darker than they actually are when they're wet, and as they dry, the colors loses a bit of its intensity, making it look more dull. This is what I mean by final color. To understand timing though, we only need to learn the next techniques. These three techniques I actually use on this painting, so you might spot them while I paint. I find these to be the perfect bridge between wet on wet and wet on dry, because they offer more control than wet on wet, but less control than wet on dry. The easiest one, which is the first step to wet on wet painting, would be charging. This is when you add more paint to an already wet surface. This can cause blooms, but these are intentional, usually when you want colors to mix with each other or just let the pigments dance on the paper. One of the simplest ways to create a gradient which can help you vary the edges in your painting is by using pulling. When the surface of the paper is full of paint, we can rinse our brush and then touch this area and pull it away. The water in our brush and the paint on the paper will dilute and leaving some small gradient. This is commonly used in florals, but it can be used in whatever you want in whatever way you want. The last of the three is one of the most complicated ones, but it is also one that can help you achieve interesting textures as well as very occasionally help you fix mistakes. Let's say you put down a wash of a blue sky but forgot to add clouds. You could use a damp brush or a paper towel to lift some of the paint off the paper. This is what it's called lifting. However, you can't use this at any time, especially when you're using a brush, because if you go in too early or too late, it won't work. This is why this technique will help you to understand the concept of timing. The final part of this progression is to do and apply all of these different techniques while your paper is still wet, and then you'll be painting wet on wet. But the aspect of control is a bit harder, but that's okay because when we paint wet on wet, that's when we're supposed to let go of control and let the painting paint itself, which is the most magical part about watercolors. Even knowing the right progression through the watercolor techniques, there's a specific time that we should spend on each technique, and that is different for everyone and impossible for me to share in this video. But I am working on a watercolor roadmap to show you exactly the right progression for you so you know when you can move forward. I have already shared part of these roadmaps with the people who subscribed, but if you would like to get this roadmap when it comes out completely for free, I will leave a link to it in the description below so you don't have to subscribe to my channel and watch all my videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.